Well, it's time for another TAD Talk to talk about all things recruitment marketing. And so today, Amanda and I are going to touch on recruitment strategy. This is a very broad topic. And so we do have a couple of items out on our website now that talk to some of the components that we're going to be speaking to. So feel free to use those resources. But from a high level, we really want to talk about the things that make up the recruitment strategy. So let's get started with I'm going to name the 6 things, Amanda, just so that we can go back and talk through them. In a little bit more depth. So the first one would be employer brand. And then really, how does that employment brand articulated? So there's a lot of different resources out there. And we want to make sure that we have that brand consistent across all mediums. The next would be social media and how we use it for recruitment marketing. Optimizing your media spend. This is a huge line item for everybody as it relates to their budget. And so we want to make sure that that's optimized correctly. The use of videos. And this one we always kind of get into with our clients to determine if it's possible to get videos created. And then the last one being tapping into our candidate database and nurturing that database. And so let's go back and talk really quickly about employment brand. Again, feel free to reference our website for additional materials. But when we talk about employment brand, we're really talking about uncovering what the brand and the culture is like within an organization. We often speak to our clients about not having it be a boardroom discussion. So the leadership should not be determining what that brand communication piece looks and feels like, but really speaking to the employees. So this can be a very in-depth project that we take on with our clients to survey employees, to actually have in-person focus groups or virtual focus groups. But we really want to take a deeper dive into what makes up the culture of the organization. So Amanda, do you want to chime in really quickly on your thoughts on brand, since it's a huge topic?
It is such a big topic. One thing that's really different and is a line I like to use when we're talking to clients, brand is one thing. When you're selling a product or you're selling a service, it's a lot easier to promote that and sell that and market that. For employer brand, you're really selling a culture, not a product. So you're selling the culture, the people, the employees of your business. So it's really important to note the difference between the two, because telling your employer brand story is going to be very different than telling your brand story itself. And then the other thing to point out is your employer brand is not what you think it is. It is what others think it is and what your employees think it is. So as Stacey mentioned, when we work on employer brand, one of the first things we do is a focus group with your employees to see internally, what do they think your brand is? Do you have a brand? Do they know what your brand is? A lot of times, not everybody does. Not everybody knows how to speak to it. So it is important to differentiate what your employees are saying about you versus what you are saying about yourself.
Yeah, it becomes a great sales tool. And unfortunately, I think every organization has a brand. It's just how well it's articulated, how well it's, communicated to employees, so outside the organization as well as inside the organization. We often hear from our mostly prospects when we're talking to new clients, we're talking about employer brand, and there's also a difference between the full in-depth branding project that we might take on to really figure out how to communicate it well, and just kind of reskinning what you have or making things sound better. And so brand is a huge topic. It's one that we dive into a lot and we spend a lot of time on. So we're just touching on it today. But it is something that, as Amanda said, it's the perception of what people think the organization is. And sometimes that perception is really communicated in places we don't want. So Glassdoor ratings, Indeed reviews, places where current employees and past employees are providing their perception of the organization and what they felt the benefits were like, or the organization, the management team, a lot of different things. So when we're talking about a brand, our next step in that strategy component was really talking about how do we communicate it? What do we want to be telling the external audience, the new job seekers that may be looking at our opportunities about the organization? So we really do want that to be consistent. So once the brand is created, how do we spill it across everything? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Amanda?
Yeah, I think that kind of folds into the next step of our strategy, the content and social media piece of it. So what are you doing on social media? Are you creating career-specific social media pages, or are you highlighting things about your jobs and your culture on your main channels? Do you have a separation of when you post on the employer brand side versus the brand side? What is the consistency of that? How are you telling your story? Again, there's so many different variables, but social media and the content that you put out there across, again, like Stacey said, Glassdoor, Indeed, your job descriptions, your career websites, and social media all play into that second part of a recruitment strategy.
Yeah, the social media is one that we actually try to tell people not to do unless they're ready to do it. If you don't have the resources, and by resources, we really mean time. I mean, there's a budget allocation that goes along with this, but the time component is probably the biggest one because we need feet on the ground. We need people telling us what's going on in the organization so that we can communicate that out in a social strategy, in the content that we develop. So we really want to make sure that the resource aspect is there. It's actually easier to do paid social media because we're just setting up a campaign or two and targeting it to the right group than it is to do that organic posting. So if we can get the marketing team involved, if we can get communications, the recruiters, people in different locations, it really does make that social media piece come to life. So the resource aspect is probably the most difficult for any organization when we're talking about how it relates to what we put in place for recruitment marketing anyway. We've talked a lot about, and we will continue to talk a lot about the next one, which was the media spend and how do we optimize the spend. We have a kind of an ethos here at Wicresoft is we don't care how our clients spend their money just as long as they're spending it effectively. We really want the media that they're using to be the most effective for them and get the ROI that they're looking for. So when we're talking about optimizing media, we really dig into the data. Amanda and I probably love spreadsheets to a fault, love data, love metrics, love everything about it. But that allows us to paint a picture to see how well a media is performing. So when we start to do budgeting with our clients every year to talk about their strategy for the upcoming year, it really is about what performed well and what didn't. Where should we take money from? Where should we put money? And sometimes that means, taking money out of something that's worked okay in the past and putting something new. And maybe that's, looking at a pilot program, something that we test to see if it's going to work in their environment. But that optimizing of the media spend is probably the majority of our business just because it is such a big line item and it is so important for every client to determine how they're going to allocate those funds. Amanda's probably more involved in the spreadsheet aspect than I am. So talk about what you look at when you're looking at how well a media is performing.
I think what's super important is when you go direct to some of the platforms that we all work with, or if you're working with other agencies, one of the first things they might say is you need to spend more budget. You need to increase it. You need to have more money. We don't do that. The first thing that we do is look at the research. We pull your data, the history from all the platforms you use, and we look at what was working, what isn't working, and we help you redefine all of that. So whether it's job descriptions being redone, whether it's testing different job titles, it could be testing different creatives if we're doing social media. We do a bunch of research and then we test and then we provide the recommendations. Most cases, there's no increase in any spend. It is us utilizing the media better, as Stacey mentioned, optimizing it better, which most people don't have the time to do. And a lot of agencies, unless they're specifically recruitment marketing or acquisition services, don't know how to optimize it because it doesn't work necessarily the same as Google does or as Facebook does. The job boards can be a little bit different. So I think it's important to note that when we pull the data, we look at all of the numbers and all of the information to make sure you're optimizing everything the way it should be.
What's interesting is we get a lot of prospects coming to us asking about this very specific piece. They want to know how to do the brand and the career website and all the different components, but really, how do I make my media work better? They always feel like they're spending so much and they're getting less return every year. And that there's a lot of job seeker behavior that goes behind that. But I think this is one of the biggest places that we can make an impact with a new client as well as with our existing client base is really how effective is the spend for them.
Absolutely. I think one other thing to touch on is that we do audits. We can do robust audits, we can do quick audits, and that can be on your job boards that you're using, your social media, any sort of digital platform that you're using. We can do an audit to see at a high level if we can tell if things are working or if we can improve it. So also something that is useful to our clients so that they know if their budget is working for them, because in some cases we might find that everything's looking good and we'll tell you that. So it's nice piece.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've done a lot of audits over the years, and the one that I think is one of the ones that stands out is generally there's what we find is clients are trying to put too many jobs into their budget. So if we're doing a pay-per-click or pay-per-apply start, there's too many jobs going into any campaign. But one of them I did several years ago, they didn't have enough jobs. And so they had like $7,000 for one job and the job continued to run. I mean, it was just one of those things where they forgot to feed the jobs into the system or change the campaigns. And so you don't see that very often. And sometimes, to your point, we see where people are doing a great job with it and we can make minor improvements. But a lot of times we can make a huge impact. And we see a big impact and almost to like, 100% change over the course of a couple of months. I mean, it can be a huge impact for clients and they can figure out how they can spend a little bit less if they've been overspending to begin with. Oh, the dreaded videos. So everybody loves videos. Everybody looks at videos. Everybody is doing something with videos. But when you speak about videos in recruitment marketing, it's like everybody goes quiet. And it's not because it's not well, the conversation's well received. It's just that it's very difficult to get videos created in a corporate environment, especially when you're talking on employees. Do we have the sign-offs? Do we have the right tools? Are we consistent with the brand? But it's really important to use videos. We can use videos not just on a career website to talk about the day in the life and the testimonials and just great information that people can put forward, but we could use them as advertising components on LinkedIn, on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of capabilities with videos. And Amanda, your background is digital marketing, so you know this better than I do, and I'll let you speak a little bit more to this. But we do love videos, just can't get them.
Absolutely, it is one of the harder things to get, like Stacey mentioned. We push for it, but if it is something that isn't on your radar, or if it's something you haven't even thought about, or maybe you didn't budget for it this time, definitely make it something that you do in the future. People love content. People love video content. TikTok didn't become big because nobody wanted to watch videos, and they made it smart. They made them short and simple to start with, and then eventually grew them so that they were longer. It's the exact same idea with the employer brand videos. People want to see your culture. They want to understand a day in the life. They want to hear testimonials. They want to see you at your community events where you're helping. They want to see all of that. They want it to be personal as they're looking for you as a company. So video is very important, and again, hard to do, and we understand, but something that definitely has to be part of your recruitment strategy going forward.
There are a lot of platforms now that allow you to do videos a lot easier. It's just taking the investment and making sure like we have the communications team involved to ensure that we're doing it correctly for the clients. And the last one, we're going to talk about the candidate database. And we do like to talk about this. There is a recent podcast or TED Talk that we did with Paul Wills, who's now the president of our organization. And we talk about the candidate nurture portion of this. But the candidate database is a huge repository for all the candidates that have ever applied to your company. So they have shown interest, they want to know more, they applied for a position. And so we continue, and organizations continue to go out and post more jobs and get more candidates into the database. What we want to do is make sure that our clients are tapping into those databases. Are we using the people that have already raised their hand and said, yes, I'm interested? Or are we going out and buying more, which a lot of times we're going out and buying more. So we talk a lot to our client base about the candidate nurture program. So how often can we communicate with those individuals in the database? If they've said no, if they've accepted another offer, if they have more experience now because they haven't applied in 2 years, how do we get in front of them and communicate that we have opportunities? Again, to your point, what are we doing in the community? A lot about what people are looking at is what is the organization doing from a give back perspective? So we want to make sure that when we're reaching out to the individuals in this database, we're not just talking about opportunities, we're talking about everything that goes on in our culture so they can understand what it's like to work there. But it is a huge, we have clients that have millions of people in there that they're just not necessarily using on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, it's an untapped market, we call it. It's somebody that already opted in to your network, somebody that has signed up for something or applied, and it's just a little gold mine of people waiting to hear from you. And again, this is very similar to the social media side of things, where it isn't necessarily an outreach about all the jobs you have available this month. It could be a monthly newsletter that highlights those different sections, the community events, the month that you're celebrating, the employee that was promoted, and then a section on jobs as well, or sending people as a referral. It can be all sorts of different perspectives and content when you're reaching out to that untapped pool that you have built over the last few years. So it makes sense to really nurture those candidates and continue to send them things, even if they applied 2 years ago, as Stacey mentioned. It's still someone that could be interested or had a bad Friday and they want to quit work.
We use that internally. Well, we appreciate everybody hanging on. If you made it to the end, we appreciate it. We know this one went a little bit longer than our normal TAD Talks, but these are really foundational pieces that when we start working with somebody or when we're evaluating the candidate experience, we really look at the foundational pieces to see if we can be doing them better. And so this was just kind of a high-level recap of those 6 areas that we really look into. So we appreciate everybody's time and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.